Hello, Jelly Spoons. My name is Arky Shea. That is Joel C. Cordes. This is basketball by the association.
That's not bad. That's not bad. You held the pitch.
I held the what? Oh, different
The
word.
pitch.
Sorry.
The pitch.
That's
the
right.
P.
Sorry, my bad.
Not the main skid row.
We got 2 or 3 games left in the old NBA season. Going to be having a little bit of a shorter podcast today because really, what's really up for grabs, right? A little bit of city, but we were trying to figure out a time to be able to record this to your podcast. And Joel at one point said, as I was trying to say, hey, can we do 11, 11:15? How about 11:20, 11:22, 11:23? Joel was like, hey, man, if we need to punt it for this week, that's fine. And I was like, Joel, you will not get away from losing the West last night to the NBA's Denver Nuggets. And that discussion, nay, I say, we will be talking about this. However, Joel, it is very much worth mentioning that with 2 games left and only 1 game back of Denver and tied with OKC with 1 game back, still legally possible to win the West. However, Denver has San Antonio and Memphis to end the season. But the number 2 seed's okay because OKC has Milwaukee and Dallas, I think, for the last 2 games. So, chance still to win the West, technically? Probably not, but I don't know.
Yeah. Minnesota's got Atlanta and Phoenix on their last 2. And I said this last week when we met. You were asking me who's going to win the West. I said it'll be the winner of the Minnesota-Denver Nuggets showdown, both teams coming off a back-to-back. That was playoff caliber basketball last night, and first 3 quarters, it was close. Minnesota had leads at times, but they couldn't capitalize off of turnovers that they forced. They were about even with Denver, but the Nuggets were getting points off of their turnovers. Minnesota could not capitalize. Minnesota did not shoot the free throws very well, and then they gave up a ton of offensive rebounds. There was a point in the third quarter where Nikola Jokic was pretty much allowed to do whatever he wanted, both by the Wolves defense and by the referees, and things got a little bit out of hand. But I'm not going to play that card because it was only a 3-point game going into the fourth quarter, and Denver rose to a level defensively. I've watched a lot of Nuggets games this year. They rose to a level defensively that I have not seen them play this year in the regular season, and Minnesota is the elite defensive team coming into that matchup, but Denver took it to another level. It was Peyton Watson blocking 6 shots. He just completely snuffed out Naz Reid over and over again. They were flying all over the place. Every single Nuggets player that was on the floor was locked into the game plan, and they played hard, and they played like defending champs, and they deserved to win that game. And in essence, I hate to say this, they deserve to win the West.
Wow, just conceding the whole conference in the middle of April.
Well,
wow.
I didn't say go to the NBA Finals, but win the Western Conference and get the number 1 seed. I can give them that. They earned that last night, and they've been staying in the hunt all season. Minnesota's been barely ahead, but like a marathon runner, you stick right behind the lead person and you save some energy, and then you take it at the end.
Was that a gut punch, especially after reading the news that Alex Rodriguez wouldn't be buying the team because he wanted to cut the roster by like $30 million immediately?
Oh, well, you know who leaked that story. That's a leak from Glenn Taylor 100% to go, you guys would all rather have me as owner. I mean, we could spend an entire show on the ownership debacle, but let me say this. Glenn Taylor has been kind of a shady business guy for a long time. I give him props for keeping the Wolves in Minnesota. He did a great job with that. He has not done a great job as owner in most other regards, and Wolves fans everywhere are wanting this to get over quickly and for Taylor to be done as owner. And I don't doubt for a second that A-Rod and Mark Lowry, and eventually someday, once Taylor's out of the picture, Kevin Garnett will run a much better ship in Minnesota than Glenn Taylor ever did.
Do you think Taylor has to be completely gone before Garnett comes back?
Yes, 100%. KG will not touch the Wolves at all until Taylor is out of the picture. They tried to patch things up, when Garnett came back to Minnesota at the tail end of his career. There was a promise that Garnett and Flip Saunders and Sam Mitchell were all going to be involved in moving the franchise forward. And of course, Flip Saunders tragically passes away, and Glenn Taylor reneges on his verbal commitment to that. And Sam Mitchell was not given a fair shake at being head coach. Garnett was kind of slandered by Taylor again, and he was done with it. And Taylor has done this before where he said he's going to do one thing and then goes back on it. So this unfortunately is going to go to the courts. But yeah, it didn't have anything to do. I mean, it's not a gut punch on the court. Minnesota went into that game without Karl-Anthony Towns. Anthony Edwards coming off a 51-point night. They played hard. It was a fantastic game. Denver was just more cohesive down the stretch, and they played better defense at home. They also hit the offensive glass as hard as any team I've seen this regular season.
Well, let's just say this also, Dennis. Screw Denver. We don't care about Denver right now. It's not one of our teams. And congratulations on winning the West. If they don't collapse against Wemby.
If Wemby even plays, because they sat him the other night too, my fantasy basketball team in the championship. Not happy about that one.
Well, you should be happy that Karl-Anthony Towns has been cleared for full contact activity, and sources are saying that he may come back and start getting with the team on the old weekend, which makes sense because it's the end of the regular season.
They need to. They've got the Friday night game, and I think they've got one or two more after that. They got to get as many as they can with him, because even though he'll come back and even though he can score, the team has played faster without him. Naz Reid has, slid into that starting lineup.
I think you only got two left. I think you got Friday and Sunday left.
Yeah. Defensively, they've been better, and that's not a knock against Karl. It'll be great to have him back. I said without him, their ceiling is severely capped, but he is a guy that they've kind of had to accommodate so much for. It's going to take time to reaccommodate Karl-Anthony Towns and shake off the rust. You do not want to be doing that in a first-round playoff series in the Western Conference. Not this Western Conference, not this year.
The Minnesota Timberwolves did happen. Do you read anything in the fact that they were 11-5 without him?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
11-6
after last night.
Yeah. Naz Reid gives you what Karl-Anthony Towns gives you offensively to about 85%, and with fewer headaches, and defensively is the better player. Karl-Anthony Towns is by far the better passer, but Towns as a supermax guy, Naz Reid nowhere near that much money, and the Wolves up against the salary cap. I've been saying that Towns is kind of the weak link and expendable, and I still say that going in, and Towns has been a good soldier. He deserves to come along for this ride. I hope they get a championship this year so that they can move Towns, in good faith, but I don't know if that'll happen or not, but moving Towns to a team that brings you back another wing defender, or a couple of them, guys that can shoot a little bit, that would be preferable, but I don't know that that'll happen at this point. Towns has raised his trade value. He has played well this year.
Well, we're not trading him yet. How about that? Let's hang on to him for your sake until you get to meet us in the garden in June, buddy. That's what's going to happen. Listen, if both those teams make it to the finals, we're traveling to at least one of those games, right?
That would be amazing. I got to ask you, we talked about this last week because we I don't know if we sensed it coming or we're just afraid of it. Julius Randle had not been shut down for the year yet. And like Karl-Anthony Towns, we had both kind of said, Randle caps the Knicks' ability to maybe make it to an NBA Finals. But now that it's official, the good news is OG Anunoby is back, Isaiah Hartenstein is back, Mitchell Robinson is back. Almost everybody besides Julius is there. How are you feeling about the Knicks right now?
Oh, better
in an
than
Eastern
ever.
Conference where, the Bucks are stumbling up in the 2 seed. Cleveland didn't get hot like we thought we did. Orlando suddenly looks like that young, wet behind the ears team that we were afraid they might be.
How about this? Watch them when the Knicks punk down Boston tonight. That's how you know. Granted, Boston doesn't really have anything to play for against tonight, and the Knicks, are still trying to. Now they clinch a playoff spot, but they're still trying to keep a top 4 seed, which they technically could lose out on. If
Boston may rest some guys tonight. Yeah. Don't be surprised.
Boston may not need everybody, or may not care while they're out there. They may just Richard around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love it. Julius Randle's my guy. It's poor man's MVP. I haven't loved a New York Knicks player this much since, I'd have to say, probably since Ewing.
The fact that it took you that long, I was wondering if you would go the Ewing route, but the fact that it took you that long, that says everything, man.
I was a defender of Carmelo Anthony, but I didn't love the guy. I just thought, he was sort of that, sort of mercenary pickup that,
Mm-hmm.
Granted did take them into the playoffs, and they did play well in the playoffs with him.
Yeah, they were an
Sure.
entertaining team while it lasted.
Yeah. But it was very brief, and once Amari Stoudemire got hurt, that was it. That team was never the same again. It's probably, since definitely the Ewing teams. I really, really like Charles Oakley, but man, Ewing was so endearing to me. I could not imagine loving a guy who looked like he was physically tore up from the moment he walked into the league more than Patrick Ewing. So, he's probably the guy I've liked really the most since him. Now, Jalen Brunson's starting to get on the other, but it's year one for me with Jalen Brunson. So, I'm starting to really enjoy him. But I do think that, this team is in the best shape that it's been all season without Randall, of course. And depends on whoever ends up getting that number 6 spot. If the Knicks are able to hold on and maybe win tonight, probably essentially clinch that 6 spot or 3 spot. I would not hate them against Philly or Orlando or who's Indiana. I would not. I think the Knicks. I think the Knicks are a team that can make it to the Western the Eastern Finals. I should say. Yeah. So I named all the
other to the Western Finals. We have a problem.
So all right, a couple more things I wanted to talk about with this edition of this here podcast. Speaking of the teams that we're talking about, let's go back to the West. Actually, no, let's just stay in the East for just a minute. You brought up Cleveland. They've lost 6 of the last 10. Orlando's lost 6 of the last 10 as well. These are teams that are stumbling at the time that they don't want to be stumbling. The team that is hot right now is Philadelphia, who is trying to get up to that 6th spot. They are a game back of Indiana right now, and they have 2 games. Both of those teams have 2 games left. Joe, I thought Philadelphia would get up to that spot. They still got a couple games to do it. They've won 6 in a row, while Indiana's won 3 in a row. They haven't quite had a chance to chase them down.
Both are 7-3 in their last 10, yeah.
But Indiana's got Cleveland and Atlanta next. That's kind of going to make it interesting. I should say very, very interesting, because both those games are very losable for them.
Yeah, and both opponents have something to play for yet.
Exactly. Because that's, for me, that's one of the reasons I want to talk about something in the West is, teams to get something to play for. But do you think that I feel like we've already given the East away to Boston, right? But do you think that there is a team below Boston that could give Boston at this point in time a formidable series coming out of the West, in the East? I'll tell you, Giannis being hurt going into the playoffs, right. I don't like, and they've been, God, say what you want about Doc Rivers, it's never good. New York, I think, can be somewhat formidable, but we've seen throughout the season that they've gotten, they were formidable early, and they got gut punched a couple times in the middle of the season. But the Knicks also had dealt with a bunch of injuries during a couple of those games. Cleveland's not playing well, particularly well right now. Neither is Orlando.
I want to put an asterisk on Cleveland in the not playing well department. They did just get Evan Mobley back. They just did finally get Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell back. They're working through some major rust and some chemistry stuff, but the entire starting 5 group that has been so good together is finally back and healthy. And the bench, as constituted for this year, where we looked at that and said, okay, you added Max Strus, you had Georges Niang, you still got Karis LeVert, you still got some other pieces on that group. It's a good bench. It's a lot of shooting off that bench too. They are still intact. So I'm less concerned about seeding for Cleveland as I am about chemistry heading in. And I think they're working out some stuff here. I expected them to win more games, but do you think they're going to be able to, this is the last weekend. We're done after this weekend. They got to figure it out. Because if they're stuck where they are right now, I mean, their first round matchup is against Orlando, and which I'm okay with. I think Orlando is the least threatening of the group. I would say so. I think Cleveland's better than Orlando, but I think Orlando could win that series. I don't think it's impossible. You talk about Philadelphia trying to catch up to Indy, but Orlando is also just a game ahead of Philly. And so while the Pacers have won 7 of their last 10, Orlando's only won 4 of their last 10. And I think Philly is looking to catch the Magic
on the schedule too.
I think Philly's looking to catch Orlando even more than Indiana, and Philly is not the matchup that the Knicks would like to see in the first round. Philly is not the matchup that is probably not the matchup with a healthy Joel Embiid that Boston wants to see. Because remember, with a healthy Joel Embiid, the Sixers are a 2-3 or a 3 seed.
Yeah,
you're
hitting on my team. I think Philadelphia is that team. Philadelphia is that team that can give Boston troubles if it got to them, because Philadelphia is not only getting healthy at the right time, they're also playing really well at the right time, and that is so important when it comes to we talk about constantly in the NBA when it talks about injuries and how much that sort of dictates how the playoffs go. It's going in the right direction for Philadelphia right now. And the fact that they've gotten a lot of chemistry over these last couple of weeks, since Joel Embiid's in back, and the fact that they're playing well with that, that's a tough team. That's going to be a tough team if they end up seeing Boston. I think they're probably the best team of all of them to be able to beat Boston if there was a chance that they met up.
And the thing that's really important to me, beyond just Embiid coming back, because that's obvious, Tyrese Maxey, clearly the second wheel there, but can be a number one guy when Embiid goes down. And no longer do the Sixers have to rely on Tobias Harris every single night to be their third best player, sometimes their second best player. When it comes to the scoring department, Kelly Oubre Jr. is capable of being that guy on certain nights. Buddy Hield is capable of being that guy on certain nights. You still are going to need Tobias Harris to play well, but the pressure is off for a guy that I thought had been miscast as the second or third wheel in Philly for quite a number of years. And so I think they're better balanced than before. And I'm looking at them, I'm looking at Cleveland, and yes, also New York as the teams that can give Boston a run during a series. I don't think it's Milwaukee. It's definitely not Orlando. Indiana could make things weird, and Miami could make things weird in their own ways, but I don't know that either of those two teams really, give the Celtics much of a nightmare.
I think Indiana could win a couple of games at home, but I don't think
Miami will steal something nasty too, but that's about it.
I'll tell you, I don't know how many. I swear to all heavens, if Miami tries to do this again, where it's just not even the regular season, we should never talk about again, right? Except for who do you think will win this award? Who do you think will win the next award? Then it turns into, all right, who do you think loses to Miami as a 1 seed?
They are the slasher from an 80s, horror movie that just will not die no matter what you do. They just come back for the sequel again and again.
Yeah, and they're clinched in as the 8th seed at this moment. But obviously that puts you straight into the playoff round, the play-in round, I should say. And Chicago and Atlanta, no one scares me there. If you're Miami, right? So if you're
Miami just got Tyler Hero back. They're not healthy still. Yep. I don't know that the Heat will ever be healthy because it seems like every year they're just not, and it doesn't really matter. But Hero's back, and they got Terry Rozier to add to that group.
The team is full of old Patrick Ewings and Derrick Roses. It feels like every time you're oh, that guy's probably broken. That guy's broken. That guy's broken. But hey, look, they're in the NBA Finals. Oh, that's fun. Which goes to show you, Eric Spoelstra deserves triple what he gets.
I don't think there's anybody arguing that, and all props to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and the veterans who keep that team going and focused and meaningful, because the coaches can say all they want, but unless you have those guys in that culture enforcing it on the practice court and then, game time, it is a well-trained unit and machine in Miami, and it takes a great coach like Spo, and it takes great veterans like they have too.
Well, let's talk about some more veterans over in the West, where we got essentially the first 5 seeds are wrapped up. We know at least who they are going to be. What order they'll be in can be determined this weekend. However, 6, 7, 8's pretty interesting, especially. You can look at 9, 10 as well, because you had New Orleans half a game up on Phoenix, who is a game and a half up on Sacramento, who's a half game up on the Lakers, who is a half game up on Golden State. Now, if you look at what's coming up, New Orleans is in that 6th spot. New Orleans has, guess what? Sacramento, Golden State, and Los Angeles, the Lakers variety on their schedule. But I think if they win, I think they play tonight, right? Yeah, they play at Sacramento tonight. If they win tonight, they can essentially grant themselves the 6th seed and avoid the play-in. But they don't have an easy road to be able to try to do that. This is again, we brought up earlier, teams with stuff to play for. Granted, everyone knows that they're going to be in the playoffs one way or the other, play in or playoff. But still, the seeding's up for grabs. The 6th spot is still up for grabs. It'd be difficult for LA and Golden State to be able to grab that number 6 spot at this point. But they can make it tough because they're still trying to get out of that number 9 and 10 spot.
I mean, as a Minnesota fan, I want anybody but Phoenix. The Suns are the one team out of that group that Minnesota, and the one team in the West that Minnesota has played terribly against this year. Everybody else, they have been super competitive or have had the advantage. Phoenix has had Minnesota's number, and they just did it a couple nights ago earlier this week in Minnesota. Minnesota's got to close out the season against them. It's a really intriguing group. Sacramento's got no momentum right now. The Lakers and the Warriors are pedigree threats, right? They've played okay basketball. They're talented teams. The Warriors are 8-2 in their last 10. The Lakers 7-3 in their last 10, but they've lost 2 in a row. But you look at those two and you go, we still know what they're capable of. It's kind of like Miami. You get into a playoff series, all bets are off. Phoenix, super talented, super injured all year. They shuffled the deck on the bench,
super talented, super injured.
Yeah,
that's a great moniker for the teams.
They reshuffled the deck at the trade deadline with that bench again, so it's not as if they've had time to really bring chemistry together. But the sheer firepower of that group is scary, and New Orleans is scary because Zion is here, and as far as we know, is going to be in a playoff series. And Brandon Ingram, as far as we know, is going to be in a playoff series. They've got all those young guys in that starting lineup. They've got veterans on the bench. And it's tough because Dallas, all of a sudden, 9-1 in their last 10 games, winners of 5 in a row. Kyrie, Luka, not only clicking, but the starting lineup with the new guys, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, along with Derek Jones. It's the new Lob City. It is the new Lob City with those guys, and they're really playing well. So, when I talked about like this Western Conference, pick your poison. Like, I think Sacramento's probably the only team, and maybe the Clippers if Kawhi, can't come back healthy, which is that's the forever story. Yeah. Those might be the only 2 teams where you look at and go, yeah, I think we probably want to play them. I don't think you can look at the Pelicans and go, yeah, I want a piece of that, because that the Pelicans they're primed to be a spoiler.
Do you know what I was thinking about this watching the Knicks the other night, and it has nothing to do with Knicks. It's just sometimes your mind wanders. When they were beating down Chicago, Billy Donovan, Mr. I need to go to Kentucky, and blah 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 blah. I'm surprised that place doesn't get generally more talent. Like, more talent isn't just interested in going there. It's whatever. Anyway. So I was sort of thinking about this, like, who, if I was in the West, who am I most interested in sort of seeing, right? Like, just visually watching, not just sort of matchup wise. And so I went down the list, and in my mind, it was number 1 was Minnesota, number 2 was Denver, number 3 was OKC, then it was Dallas, then it was New Orleans, then it was the Clippers. And then you started getting into like the teams that no one will shut up about nationally, right, who are the worst in this, which is the Lakers and the Warriors. And I am over the Warriors. Like, I am over. Draymond Green's getting kicked out of games in like 9 seconds. Like I don't. Did you see that video? One video a couple weeks ago where he got kicked out of the game and Steph Curry just sort of, was like, what's going on? Like, what are we supposed to do with this guy? Like, he's over. I completely agree with him. But that team just has been in this spot for the last couple of seasons. I'm not that interested in sort of seeing what Golden State do, except for, like you say, they're the legacy team, right? They're the legacy team that's been there. The Lakers, yeah, they won a championship during COVID. That's 4 years ago now, all right? So this team has been competitive and has been very good. Last year, they were very good Western Conference finalists, right? But do I think this team is interesting enough for me to want to watch? Not in the top 6 or 7. I think there are teams
I'll say this for the Lakers. I've watched more Lakers games this year than typical, and they're watchable.
They're
you don't go out of your way for them, but they're watchable.
They're watchable, but like they're not the first team I'm going to pick out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sacramento, especially the last few weeks.
Yeah,
man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with Sacramento, man. I want badly for them to be more consistent and better than what they are, and
it's tough when you lose Malik Monk. It's tough when you lose Kevin Huerter, although Huerter's been in kind of a season-long slump. They don't have the magic they had last year, which we're afraid might happen.
Yeah. So for me, like Phoenix is that team that I'm with you. Like Phoenix is a team I would want to see, but I would not want to see if I was one of those teams that would be matched up with them. Because again, really, really good, really, really talented. Got MVPs on that roster up and down. Got all-stars up and down that roster too. They outside of the shock or the way Denver dispatched them last year, and I don't think they do that again this year. I think Phoenix is the dark horse here. That's not so dark when you think about who they are. Just the way the city's going to have them, because they're going to probably end up the sixth. They might end up the sixth. Who's Phoenix got left?
Phoenix is the one team in the West.
Sacramento and Minnesota. So
they're the one team in the West. Although the Lakers came close when healthy, but now that Phoenix is healthy, they're the one team where you look at them and go, on paper, they're 14 deep. Does that really matter when it gets to the playoffs and you only play 8-9 guys? Maybe, maybe not, but it gives you the sense of how many different options Frank Vogel has to throw out there. I've been a little bit concerned about the lack of bench production, even though they have a lot of capable guys with that group. I'm not sure if they're being deployed correctly or what the deal is. And then, of course, they made all those trades at the deadline, but they're really deep, and they got a lot of different defenders, a lot of different shooters, and I feel like, it's a bullpen analogy. They've got the deepest bullpen in the Western Conference, and sometimes you do need that in the playoffs. It obviously is about top-line star talent, but the Suns have got that in spades, too.
So, let me ask you this. We essentially know who the teams are going to be. Well, we definitely know who the teams are going to be in the playoffs. So, who do you think, because next week we'll talk about the actual playoffs, and we may try to record before, I think Wednesday is the first play-in game, right? Or is it Tuesday? Tuesday or Wednesday, the first play-in game?
I'd have to go look on the schedule. I honestly should know that and don't.
I think they get like 2 days in between, like the season being over and the first play-in. But anyway, so who has surprised you the most now that the season essentially is done? Positively or negatively? Who has just surprised you as far as who? It could be a player, a coach, or a team. Or a decision, or I'll allow a decision that shocked you the most.
Well, the decision would be the Bucks hiring Doc Rivers after firing Adrian Griffin. That's the decision. Team that's shocked me the most, I think, has been Phoenix's struggles, although they do have the built-in excuse. Oklahoma City really surprised me with how ready they were to go. But once you saw that the bench was ready, it wasn't that big of a surprise because that starting lineup has been so good. I think for me has been, it's not really a surprise. It's more just like watching in awe of Victor Wembanyama and going, okay, he took his lumps a little bit early. They had to limit his minutes, but you still saw everything you needed to see. And if that's as good as he stayed all year, it would have been a very successful rookie campaign. But he just keeps getting better and more eye-popping every single month. And we're talking about a guy who is in Defensive Player of the Year running simply on blocks alone, even though there are guys like Rudy Gobert and some of the other defenders who do more than just block shots, and they deserve the award this year. But with Wemby, you're looking at going, if you're already at this point as a rookie on a really bad Spurs team that now understands how to build around you, and that process begins, you hear that phrase, the sky's the limit, or this player has no ceiling. You see that thrown out from time to time, and it's hyperbole. This is one of those few guys where I legit don't know what the ceiling even looks like. If Wemby stays as good as he is now at the end of his rookie season, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer without any question, right? But he's so young He's so young and still has so much to learn in the NBA, and his body's got to get better and all these different things. Like, we thought Zion was an amazing prospect. Wembanyama makes Zion look like a second grader, like, honestly, and that's no disrespect to Zion.
All right, you're just
crazy.
You just love the fact that big tall dude can do the sham god dribble. That's what you're doing. That's what you're impressed by. And look, you know what? I get it. I totally get it. Okay, let me give you 3 quick surprises, and then we can walk away if you want. Okay, so for me, and I'm not gonna rank them. There's just three ones. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. This guy came onto the scene a few years ago and sort of made a dramatic improvement in how he was offensively. Last year, averages like 31 a game, 32 a game. Then this year does the same thing, averages 30 a game. Now he's not leading the league, but he's like second or third in the league in scoring on an OKC team that people were excited about, didn't think they'd be at the top of the standings the entire season. And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander turned himself into, over the last 2 seasons, an MVP, legitimate MVP type candidate.
A two-way MVP too,
Two-way MVP, yes. That I did not see coming 3 years ago. Did not have that anywhere near the bingo card of what could happen in the NBA. So I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a huge surprise for me. The fact that he followed up last year's effort with a very similar effort this year, and plus OKC is so much better. Last year they were in the play-in, right? They were playing last year. So.
Shea's just in control. When you watch him play, he's just in control of everything that's going on, and you match the game slowing down with a great mental capacity for the game and all that athleticism and those gifts. Man, he is such a good player.
The second surprise for me is Milwaukee. Not just the decision for Doc Rivers, but the fact that they have been. I mean, everything does essentially come from that decision, right? But the fact that they have been so in the middle of the league, right? And they really should be 6 or 7 or 8 games better than what they are.
Yeah.
Still a comfortable 2 seed, which is why it's such a weird year in the East, that you could be 13, 14 games back and still be the number 2 seed in the East. But still, Milwaukee just has not clicked this entire season. And they were better before they put on Doc Rivers before the All-Star game, but still they feel like that I feel like they're lost, right? Does it seem like that they're lost, that they don't have an identity that sort of makes sense to them?
We raised the red flag a little bit on them in the preseason, going, they're a defender or 2 short. The roster it's got some shooting, and you had Damian Lillard, but if you're going to take Drew Holiday out of that mix, you better replace him with some good defenders. And they did not really do that. They, get a healthy Jay Crowder, but that was it. And we said that same warning at the trade deadline, and they did essentially nothing to address that issue. Yes, adding Patrick Beverley, okay, you get some toughness, but Pat Bev is a name only at this point. He is not that big of an impact player. And they needed more. You could have added Patrick Beverley if you were adding 1 or 2 other good defenders, and then I would have said, oh yeah, that's a nice guy to have. It's not enough, and Milwaukee has not had enough. It's not really Dame or Giannis's fault. The pairing has clicked enough. It's not as great as people thought it was going to be. And if you want to put that at the feet of Adrian Griffin, like you said, they were better before Doc Rivers, but they weren't that much better before Doc Rivers, and that's what got Griff fired. So
you could see kind of the way Boston has started the season. You could kind of see where Milwaukee may have gotten a little antsy, but nowhere near to make a decision like that, especially for how good they were to start the season.
Right.
And thirdly, Memphis for me. You knew the beginning of the season was going to be an interesting slog for the first 25 games with Ja Morant's suspension. But then they had a little bit of a bump when he came back, but not much of one. And they've been just tanked with injuries.
Steven Adams never played the entire season. They cut bait on him, even though they loved him.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the starting lineup except Jaren Jackson, was basically out much of the year.
Yeah. So it's such a I thought they would be much, much better. And injuries do torpedo a season. I could totally get that. But I did not foresee clearly the entire roster being injured at some point for Johnny chunks of the season. And I thought Ja Morant, as long as they held serve around 500-ish, when Ja Morant come back, that would be a boost in the arm, what they needed. And they got it for a little bit, but they were so bad early because of early injuries. Like, think about it, their season never really got started.
No.
It really, this was just a lost cause. It felt like from essentially game one. So
they were up and play-in territory, sort of, or at least trending in that direction when Ja came back before he hurt the shoulder. All of a sudden, they win a few in a row, and you're like, all right, they're still within spitting distance of the play-in. They'll make up that ground.
Yeah, they got plenty of time.
Desmond Bane came back right around that time too, but it lost cause. Never had Marcus Smart. Never really had Derrick Rose for the year. It should have been better. The only good news, and this has been said a whole bunch of times, but they have had a chance to develop some of those young guys. Memphis is not a team that can sport a giant payroll. And so as some of those top flight starters become super expensive, you need to be developing younger guys. And Memphis did get a freebie year to kind of play as a bad team, but get extra looks to a lot of guys that are going to be in the rotation next year.
It's not quite the same, but it's kind of like when Golden State got really bad a few years ago because of injuries. That they were able to take advantage with some good draft picks and such, and also were able to get some more playing time for younger dudes. And then you came back and you're like, oh, that's the redemption tour. That's the Remember Us tour. I don't know if Memphis is going to be that next year, but Memphis is going to be a much, much, much better team next year.
I tell you what, Ja better have his head on straight. Ja better have his head on straight because he owes that Grizzlies team. He owes them at this point a magical, mature season, and you hope that good karma comes along with it in the injury department, that he's got a full roster of teammates to play with, because they can get right back into the mix very quickly, but this all hinges on Ja Morant being a knucklehead last offseason.
I think you're right. This is where you find out what this guy is made of, right? You had the suspension. You had the coming back and being really good and then getting hurt. You had the team being really, really bad and really hurt. There was really nothing redeemable about this year if you're a Grizzlies fan. So you go through the turmoil legally from last offseason into the year. Then you go into a really bad season, including injuries for yourself. Now you got a chance at over a year's worth of adversity to sort of deal with. Like, this is the sort of you kind of make or break what a guy's going to be mentally on the court for a franchise when something like that happens. So I'd love to see Ja Morant come back, head on his shoulders, and ready to just light up Beale Street for a long, long time.
And last thought for me, and you said this probably a few shows ago, but it's stuck with me. Ja Morant was Anthony Edwards last year, 2 years ago. Ja Morant was the up-and-coming guy who was the face of the league, who had everybody talking, who was on the highlight reels. And, Ant was a good player coming up, and we had high hopes for him. But Ja didn't just lose out on a season in Memphis. He didn't just lose out on a lot of question marks around his, maturity and decision-making. He lost out on the opportunity to be the face of the league. And he's never going to get that back. Like, Anthony Edwards has taken that mantle, and there still are guys like Nikola Jokic and Luka and, all these other phenomenal players, Joel Embiid, go on and on, who are faces of the league. But Anthony Edwards has the chance to become like the transcendent guy that is just so cool that everybody wants a piece of. And that was Ja Morant, and he blew it.
Sells on all the jerseys, put your name on, put your face on all the video games, all that stuff. That was that's the chance now Anthony Edwards has, because he's had such a phenomenal year. I mean, dude's dunking his own head like in the backboard. It's like there's just no end to what that guy can do. And Ja Morant with the guy, Ja Morant literally every night was like, what dunk did he do? What did he do tonight? What did he do tonight? And now we're a year gone for that, and people forget. People are willing to forgive, like for issues and stuff like that. He still can have a glorious career and be the guy that's a face of the league. There's no one saying that's not.
He can be a face in the league still, but he'll
if you
want to
be the next sort of LeBron, the next guy that's sort of seen as the leader of the class for a long time for the league. I don't think Ja's going to be able to get that back. And he had it right in the palm of his hand. We all wanted it, Joel. We all wanted it for him.
Yeah.
Oh. Now we got to give it to some guy from Minnesota. whatever. I'm going with Halliburton. Actually, I can't go with Halliburton because he's an indie guy now.
It's not Tyrese and it's not Shea, but those guys are faces of the league. Like those are luminary players in the league for sure.
Oh my God! Like, could you imagine the push that would be given to him if Anthony Edwards or Ja Morant was in like New York or Los Angeles?
Right. Oh yeah. Yep.
Then he would be the face of the league.
Right.
No doubt.
It's unfair, but it's the reality of it. You are absolutely 110%
I mean,
correct.
the Knicks are good. Jalen Brunson's top 5 in the league in scoring. The Knicks are good, and still the Knicks don't get as much because they're not as exciting of a team. They don't have like as exciting of a player. Jalen Brunson's just a really good scorer. Julius Randle's just really good. I think Hartenstein, they're just a bunch of really good players, but they don't have a transcendent type player that could be that. And there's only a couple of those in the league, so All right, Joel, that's going to do it for us talking basketball. So the next time we'll talk, they'll be doing what we like to call postseason play. That's right. I came up with that term. What do you think? You like that term?
We can use it. I'll allow it.
All right. You and your Bucks shirts, you say goodbye to everybody.
Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes is where you find the audio-only version of this here podcast. If you want the video version, find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll do it again. This has been Basketball by Association. Goodbye.